Oh, wait. You didn't hear that. Allegedly, we are live again. Try and make sure this thing right here, is it picking me up well enough? Is it working now? Don't use my arms. Okay. Okay, we're getting good at this. Dude, I cannot lower this chair. Oh crap, I didn't post the link. Did not post the link. The Twitch link. KRUI link doesn't even really work. Massive technical difficulty last week. I do not think I was even on air. I did the stream. I was on the stream, but I was not on air on the radio, I don't think. So that was a major failure. But I think I know what I'm doing now. Oh wait, Brandon Pill's in here already? Wow. Best thing to come out of Iowa each week. I can feel the vibes being saved every second. You know, I'm really glad I can do that for you. Because saving the vibes is a really important task, and not enough people focus on that. It's a really important matter in our country. And saving the vibes is just... I think politicians should talk about it. Because the vibes are what keep people going. And I'm here to do that for you every Saturday at 11 a.m. on KRUI 89.7 FM, Iowa City. I'm going to warn you, this is a boring one. I find it interesting, but it's boring. You are so very welcome. Oh, dude, I didn't post the link. It's too late now. It's already 11:10. And allegedly, we're live. You are listening to Save the Vibes live on KRUI 89.7 FM. I'm your host, Sweet Jorna. And this week was a big week for people into the boring side of the news. I'm talking die-hard, fall asleep to MSNBC consumers of the news. For everyone who needs a more chaotic week to keep up with worldwide events, I've got some bad news. But for everyone with a neckbeard, we're about to feast, so get cozy in your car or whatever activity you do while listening to transistor radio. I want to talk about the New Hampshire Republican primary results. Of course, Donald Trump won, taking 54% of the Republican vote in the state. But Nikki Haley came in second. Trump's a final competitor, so of course she came in second, but with 43% of the vote. That may seem like a loser to you, as she quite literally is in this instance, but that's only an 11-point difference. Trump pretty much had Iowa. At most, everyone already knew it. The margin he won over Nikki Haley was 30 plus percentage points, and New Hampshire was a pretty liberal state. Nikki Haley was politically to the left of Trump and was already projected to do better there than in Iowa. But in the Iowa race, Ron DeSantis was still in. He was the runner-up. He has since dropped out of the race, leaving his voter base to split between Trump and Haley. Now, we know DeSantis is a little to the political right of Trump, So purely on political morals and science, it's assumed that DeSantis supporters would flock to Trump, but that's only what would happen in a normal election. Donald Trump's presence in really any election since coming onto the political scene kind of throws off all logic. He's spoken it into existence since he launched his original campaign in like 2015, that he's not a normal candidate, and he's really not. He's got loyalists, he's got enemies, and his actions in, by the way, almost 10 years he's been in politics have made new members of both of his fan bases. When Haley voters in New Hampshire were asked after the primary why they voted for Haley, many of them said they just could not vote for Trump. I'm going to preface what I'm about to say with that this prediction did not come from any experts. This is purely of my own, possibly naive hopes. But DeSantis voters, although probably to the political right of Trump, might show up to support Haley just because she's not Trump. I'm personally taking this 11% margin of difference in New Hampshire as a sign that people might start seeing Haley as having a fighting chance. There was a 30-point difference here in Iowa because Trump already had the state and people clearly prefer him to Ron DeSantis. I think when it came to New Hampshire, it's down to Trump and Haley, and voters were discouraged by that initial 30-point margin. So some registered Republicans just gave in and voted for who they knew would win against their wishes, and they voted for Trump. But Haley still got 43% of Republicans, of the Republican base in a state. There's a lot of people who don't like Trump. Joe Biden won the 2020 election because people didn't like Trump. If we're being completely honest here, there were like 5 Biden supporters in the entire nation, and he got the Democrats by default as the Democratic candidate. But he also got the moderate Republicans that experienced 4 years of Donald Trump being in office and didn't want that to happen again. I think now that it's been shown in one state that the margin of difference between Haley and Trump, between Trump and a not Trump candidate, it's realistically, say, like 18%. People in future states may swing to Haley. As I said, this could potentially be a very embarrassing hope to have. You know, I'll come back on air in a week or two and have to entirely walk back this statement that I've said today. But I'm open to that, but we need just one more primary to really know where this is going. I'll concede after the next primary if I'm wrong. But Trump is still cojones deep in legal battles. Just last night, it came out that Donald Trump has been ordered to pay writer E. Jean Carroll $83.3 million for defamation, which is reminding the public that he's been accused of rape, and in all but criminal court, he's been held liable for that accusation. Further in the news this week, of course, an update on Palestine. In addition to the steadily continued bombing campaign and ground invasion of Gaza by Israel, 9 people were killed and 75 injured in an airstrike on a UNRWA shelter in southern Gaza. The UNRWA is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in the Near East. This is the UN's agency that directly administers aid to Palestinians and has been doing so since 1950. The shelter was explicitly marked as a UN facility, and its location had been shared with Israel and the IDF as a place to not strike. This comes amidst an already existent struggles to administer aid to Palestinian refugees throughout the entire Gaza Strip, with 75% of Gaza's 2 million plus residents displaced. According to the UN, Israel has explicitly been denying the entry of vital medical supplies and sanitation equipment, including water pumps, solar panels, fuel, etc., to get hospitals running in functioning order. Gaza is also experiencing outbreaks of diseases that were previously eradicated in the territory. Israel maintains that it's defending itself by seeking to eradicate Hamas. Other impacts of the Israel-Gaza war have been the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. Now, guys, I'm going off script here a little bit. I did way too much research last night, so if you need to know literally anything about wartime insurance for your cargo ship, I'm your man. The Houthis have ramped up their level of attacks on commercial ships. We spoke a bit on this last week, but the attacks, according to the Houthis themselves, are in support of Palestinian liberation and intend to disrupt shipping links to Israel. However, over a dozen countries have been struck by these attacks, with their ships not planning to dock in Israel at any point along the way. A Houthi spokesperson this week stated that the US and British ships are specifically of target as they are the primary countries leading airstrikes in Yemen against them. Maritime insurers, specifically wartime insurers, are now seeking to discriminate against Israel, the US, and the UK in their contracts with clients, insisting that clients have no involvement with any of these three countries. They are intended as targets. The entire Red Sea has been designated as a high-risk area by the Joint War Committee, meaning that wartime insurance is required through travel through the region. Currently, wartime insurance premiums have exponentially increased from 0.07% prior to the Israel-Gaza war to now 0.5%. Now, in terms that mean something, that means that shipping companies are forced into the dilemma of paying either hundreds of thousands of dollars per ship, per trip through the Red Sea, while facing regular insurance hikes if they are the unlucky ship that is damaged by these attacks. Or they can reroute around the entire continent of Africa both ways on their trip. These costs are already being reflected in consumer prices, with even here in the US, gas prices slightly higher than they were last week. Last thing I'll say about the Houthi attacks is that if the Houthis wanted attention for Palestine, they got it, but I don't think that's what they intended to do. As mentioned earlier, the Houthis stated that their goal was to disrupt shipments to Israel, but they have so far not been doing that. Other countries and ships with no relation to Israel have been taking the brunt of the damage. I don't know enough of the details about how the Houthis have historically conducted their warfare to know what these attacks might be a cover for, but it's not coming across that this is about Palestine. On top of the US and the UK retaliating against the attacks, Russia is due to say something soon, as their economy is dependent on this Red Sea trade route, as they have increased their oil exportations to India following the worldwide divestment from the Russian oil industry following their invasion of Ukraine. China is also heavily reliant on the trade route for exportations to Europe, and the domestic Chinese economy is in a less than desirable place right now to be experiencing economic disruptions. Three pillars of world power are being significantly affected by these attacks and the price of navigating around it. So retaliation is bound to build up at some point. We just don't know how that's going to happen, and we'll be keeping an eye on it because I'm very interested. The last note of today comes from a really good PBS Frontline documentary that came across my YouTube homepage. It pretty much told me info that I already knew, but it told me again at a time that feels relevant. Relative to the New Hampshire primary, at least I believe, it reminded me of Donald Trump's policy towards Israel. The US historically has supported Israel since its establishment. In fact, it was the first country to ever acknowledge the Israel as a nation. It has tried, not very hard, but it's tried to appear unbiased about the conflict by taking on roles as a mediator in a few peace talks over the past couple years between the two nations, which secured a historical win for Israel and further solidified that the U.S. was on Israel's side in its endeavors. That maintained as the status quo until Barack Obama came onto the scene in 2008. As president, Barack Obama shook up things by being the first U.S. president to appeal to the Palestinian people. He endorsed the two-state solution, which was promising coming from an American president. He publicly was against the expansion of Israeli settlements in occupied Palestinian territory, but ultimately, none of that was followed up with much action. Although the relationship between Obama and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was icy, it was nothing significant policy-wise. Donald Trump, however, was a different story. Trump was very publicly a supporter of Israel, and unlike Obama, followed that through with significant action. During his one term in office, he moved the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. If you don't know about the conflict, you don't need to know where those cities are, but Jerusalem is a massive deal. If Israel is to fulfill its Zionist mission and become the world hub for Jewish people and preside over the Holy Land as is its biblical mission, then Jerusalem is that key. Moving the embassy was the U.S. endorsing Israel's claim to Jerusalem. During the Trump presidency, knowing that it had so full support of the U.S., Israel took many steps to advance its mission in expanding settlements and sustaining regular bouts of conflict with Palestinian militants. Joe Biden largely kept up this policy. He's not notably made an explicit public statement of the U.S.'s position for a resolution to the conflict. Obama stated that he favored a two-state solution. Trump said whatever both sides are happy with is cool. Biden has thus far not said anything explicitly, but stood in solidarity with the state following the siege against it by Hamas in October that instigated the current conflict. A group of 49 Democrats in the U.S. Senate this past Wednesday introduced a resolution that would collectively declare the U.S. stands in favor of a two-state solution, emphasizing the creation of a Palestinian state. This would really have no on-the-ground impact, but it would reiterate the U.S.'s stance on the solution of the conflict that all presidents have stated since Barack Obama. This would be useful information for the public to have in general, but this bill vote will be interesting to watch unfold, considering the pending case alleging genocide against Israel currently making its way through the International Court of Justice that South Africa introduced 2 weeks ago. Updates on that case are that, as of yesterday, the court declared that it does in fact have jurisdiction to rule over the matter, and it has advised that Israel cease and prevent all genocidal practices in Gaza, which really doesn't mean much because the ceasefire is what was desired. The court cannot enforce these measures until it issues a real verdict on the case, and that's projected to take potentially years to conclude. But I bring up Donald Trump because there's a chance that he wins the presidential election in November. He's a big friend of Israel, and they're in a serious war facing serious allegations that could have implications for allies of Israel, depending on how the ICJ rules on this case in a couple of years. We're all familiar with how judicial proceedings go for someone like Donald Trump. He doubles down, he doubles, triples, quadruples down in hopes that if he says he's right enough times, it'll eventually come true. I'm not saying he's going to walk the U.S. into an international legal trouble, but I'm saying we know his character and there's an election coming up. This is just one thing to consider in the already heaping pile of things to consider when thinking about how to participate in the democratic process. There are domestic factors to think about and international factors. Domestic issues are a very important aspect in determining how one uses their vote. We must also remember that there are many different elected officials who have sway in domestic policy. We don't have as much access to choosing who represents the country to the international system. The presidential vote that we get once every 4 years is the most direct opportunity we have to choose who other countries are seeing when they think of the primary leader of America. So choose wisely, an election's coming up. And that's all we have for today, folks. Like I said, big week for the boring stuff. We'll be back next Saturday at 11 a.m., same time, same place. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, I'll be happy to hear those over on any major social media platform. All my ats are Lenny the Fool. That's Leny_the Fool. Remember, we're live on Twitch for every show, and a little bit after, which we talk about what doesn't make it onto the radio script. You're tuned in to Save the Vibes live on KRUI 89.7 FM. I'm your host, Sweet Jorna, in Iowa City. It's been fun, but back to your regularly scheduled tunes. That was boring. I don't want to ever cover like weird sensational stories because I'm very much of the mindset if I don't have anything to say, I'm probably just shut up. But I have a show to do every week. And so if that means caring a little bit more about the boring stuff, if that means reading about maritime insurance for cargo ships, then I'll do it. Okay, let me get to this. If our presidential polls repeat how they were in 2020 with Biden and Trump being two top candidates, will your vote be opposite this election with Biden? Well, I didn't vote last election. I wasn't 18. With Biden's lack of support towards our southern borders and Governor Abbott's recent statements on his dissatisfaction with his efforts and his administration, could your vote change due to that alone? Well, I don't plan on voting for either of them. Ooh, this is about to get steamy. All right. I don't plan on voting for either of them. I'm probably going to vote independent. And I know that's practically like... I know the big thing is voting independent is like throwing your vote away. Can you hear this? Voting independent, it's like throwing your vote away. But there's a candidate that I actually like. I don't know if I should say who the candidate is. Both two people who are in here probably know who I'm talking about. But it just feels weird to discuss who I'm actually wanting to vote for. But there's an independent candidate that I actually like. And I think that's rare. I've talked about the limits of the democratic process before. We're limited to only having two parties. We're limited to whoever those two parties pick. We're never going to get a for real on the ground candidate, someone who came up from nothing and just appeal to the American people. That's never going to happen because we're only going to get who the Republican Party and the Democratic Party give us. And oftentimes voting now, just like voting in 2020, it was just like, oh God, I hate both of these candidates. 2016 even, I hate both of these candidates. I'm choosing the least of the evils. I think it's rare that there's any candidate anywhere on the ballot that I actually like. And so I'm going to use my first presidential vote and vote for a candidate that I actually like. No way he's winning. Absolutely. I'm not even, I'm not going to lie. He's not winning. But I want to use my one vote to choose someone that I actually like, that I actually agree with. And Trump and Biden are neither of those people. But, okay, let's see. Biden's lack of support towards the southern border, Governor Abbott's recent statements on the dissatisfaction with his efforts with the administration, could my vote change to that alone? Probably not. There's so many other factors, and I think border policy is not significant enough between the two parties that it would sway my vote. Either way, Republican or Democrat, I think it's horribly unorganized. I think the country and immigrants are suffering because of our current border policy, because of the implementation of that policy. It's a big mess right now, and neither parties are coming up with an organized solution. So that wouldn't totally change my vote. What would change my vote? What would make me vote Republican? What could Donald Trump say that would make me switch teams immediately? If he came up with like prison reform, if Donald Trump came out of nowhere about prison reform, you know, maybe he'll start caring because like he's balls deep about to go to prison. This Georgia case in Georgia is looking like prison to me. But if he is at threat of going to prison and just has a change of heart, he's visited by the three angels of Ghost Christmas Past, Present, and Future, and he decides he needs to be the candidate for prison reform, I would change my vote immediately. If he came up with a good solution, immediately, there I am. How long do you think it'll take Texas to turn purple? Just curious on if you believe the year would ever come. Texas turning purple. This is complete allegations. I feel like there may be election fraud happening in Texas. I am not convinced that the majority. You're telling me the majority of Texans re-elected Greg Abbott, re-elected, what's his face? Ken Paxton, the Attorney General. I feel like maybe there's not election fraud. Maybe the gerrymandered maps in Texas are just that good that the Republicans are finding a way to win. I feel like Texas is already, I don't think it's purple. I think it's Republican because people don't want to be Democratic. I don't think people are hardcore Republicans like the Republican Party is right now. Like, I don't think the majority of Texas is a Greg Abbott Republican. I think people in Texas hate Greg Abbott. So I feel like Texas, it's not purple, but if there was like a Republican and independent mix, there's a lot of moderates in Texas. I don't think Texas is ever going to turn purple because the Democratic Party is too cringy. I don't even want to call myself a Democrat because it's so disgusting. It's so appalling to me. And look at me, I'm from Texas. But I think Texas is some weird mesh in the Republican Party, largely in the Republican Party right now. But if there was like a red and green, Texas is that. But no, not purple. Not going to happen. Beto O'Rourke, he had a lot of support as a Democrat in Texas running for governor, but I think that's because of young people. There was a lot of activism happening was that 28? Not 18. That was 2022. Did he run again? I think it was 22. He ran against Greg Abbott for governor. And he got, a decent amount of support. I think once the old generation starts dying out, give it like 10 years and maybe we'll get enough young people actually voting that Texas may turn purple. 10 years. 10 years for a maybe. Okay, if Trump tried to legalize weed, he's got mine. I think I would tie that into prison reform. If everyone who has ever been in prison or jail, even doing long-term community service or like long-term probation for like marijuana possession, even distribution, if he got rid of everyone in prison for that stuff and he said it's legal in all 50 states, yeah, he'd get my vote too. That would probably make me change. But I feel like I would categorize that as prison reform. Oh, what else? This is fun. Let's keep going. Who's the other viewer in here? Is that Juan? Any political questions? I wonder if I'm still gonna get a copyright claim because the headphones are playing music. It blocked your LMAO too. That's weird. The Twitch chat is tweaking. You were loving the jet. Dang, that means YouTube's gonna block my video. But I was talking to the music director here at KRUI, emailing him. I want to actually start playing stuff after the show. And I like jazz. Bro, it blocked your butt too. It said laughing beep 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 off. Butt is a bad word. You think I'll get a 7-day ban for saying meanie butt? See, this is why I need to get on Truth Social. They wouldn't block me for saying butt. It didn't block poopy head. You're still good for saying poopy head. But, man, what else was going on? There was some other stuff I was going to include in here. I appreciate that I'm getting to a point where I'm like doing research on stories that don't end up making the cut for the show. Because I used to be scrambling to like, what can I cover today? Because I procrastinated everything. But now I'm like having to make cuts. Is this journalism? Okay, Trump blocking these border measures. I need to read more about that. I saw Philip DeFranco. I saw a little rundown of it. I read a couple articles, but I don't know enough about Trump blocking all these border measures. It seems self-serving as of now. That may have been the framing of the news coverage that I watched, but it seems very self-serving. Like he's blocking these measures to make Biden look bad, but so that he can look good. He's just like postponing them so that he can look good when he's in office, assuming he wins. He can start cracking down on the border and getting public support for it. He wants the credit. Trump on Palestine, talked about that. Declaration that Israel should stop committing genocide. You know, the ICJ declaration, not calling for a ceasefire, but telling Israel to chill out with the whole genocide stuff. People online are really, really, really upset about it. But like, I don't think we should have been expecting that. That was never going to happen. They weren't going to call for a ceasefire 2 weeks after the case was introduced. Like, all we knew was that these cases take many years to resolve. The ICJ is kind of weak anyway when it comes to actually enforcing the stuff that they rule on. This is probably going to be another instance because the ICJ is mostly like the Western countries, like the US, UK, Israel, have a lot of sway in the United Nations. And so, say the ICJ rules against Israel, they are committing a genocide and the world has to intervene. It's gonna be all of Israel's allies that have to do the enforcement of that. And I don't think that's gonna be very harsh, because if you have to punish your best friend, you're gonna spare them the worst punishment. But people are mad that a ceasefire wasn't called for. Yeah, that's disappointing, but I feel like the likelihood of that was low anyway. The ICJ ruling on this case at all is a big deal, but to think that it would have acted that quickly, I feel like that's people being mad because that's online culture. This is court, court's pretty boring. UK reparations movement. I'm gonna include this. If I can't get an interview set up for next Saturday, first of Black History Month, I want to talk about the reparations movement in the UK. I was gonna put that on last week's script. Then I was gonna put it on this week's script, and then I got carried away with war insurance. But UK reparations movement, I don't know much about, they give us little crumbs. U.S. public school, they give us our little crumbs of like Black history. They teach us slavery happened. Now it's not happening. And then Martin Luther King saved everyone and racism is over. I don't know what's happened in the rest of the world. I know like probably a third of what happened in the U.S. in terms of slavery, Black people. There were Black people in the UK, but I don't know, was there slavery there too? Are there plantations in the UK? I don't know that stuff. And I really have no idea, like, they must have had a civil rights movement if Black people were being disrespected in America, then surely they were not being tolerated in the UK. I don't know how racism functions in the UK, and I don't know what the reparations movement looked like, but I found an article that kind of introduced the topic, and I want to deep dive into it because I don't know what racism or civil rights have looked like anywhere except the US. Let's see, this one here. When the time comes where Trump and Biden are long gone and out, perhaps dead, do you think we will look back at these years as dark years for politics and finally move on from political drama? Or from here on out, do you think we're in a downward spiral for politics? I'm worried about the climate. I feel like these Trump and Biden years aren't gonna go anywhere. Like, if the ocean's boiling by 2050, we've only got how many presidential elections until 2050? I feel like right now it's hard to think so far in the future because I'm convinced the earth is going to be fried by 2050. But say the world is still habitable and people are still living, I do think these are pretty chaotic times. Just now, look back at 2016. Donald Trump was president of the United States. That's crazy. Every day you get on Twitter and it's like your heart's pounding because you don't know if Trump has tweeted about declaring war with North Korea or something. And like, that's not a normal amount of stress to be under at all times. I look back on 2016 and that whole 4-year block, 2016 to 2020. And even now, just 4 years in retrospect, that seems like incredibly turbulent times. And I feel like it's ramping up again with all these court cases and an election coming up. But I do think these are incredibly turbulent times. That weird period where Donald Trump wasn't publicly fighting his court cases, but it was right after he was ousted from office. You just kind of woke up every morning and thought, I don't really care about who's the president right now. And it was a new feeling. After 4 years of Trump, you wake up and Biden's in office. The only thing you have to worry about is did he die or not? That's calm. And, it's probably never going to calm back down if Trump is elected again. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it's going to be hectic. Now, is it a permanent downward spiral for politics? I have a little bit of hope considering Joe Biden was elected. He's so boring. People were tired of it being turbulent all the time from 2016 to 2020, so they chose a moderate, and it really has been mostly quiet. Besides the congressman, Congress has not been quiet. But permanent downward spiral, I don't know. If Joe Biden's elected again, I think that's it for Trump. He's not coming back ever again. And it'll probably be pretty calm. Elections will feel normal. I feel like a normal election. Now, I haven't really had one of those because the first election I experienced, I was too little. 2008, I don't know if that was turbulent, but like first black president, that was remarkable. 2012, not remarkable. Three of like the four elections I've lived through have been historical or very chaotic and turbulent. So I can't really tell you what a normal election's supposed to look like. What did George Bush getting elected look? I don't know. I can't tell you about that. But where was I going with that? Oh, I imagine a normal election just looks like, dang, my candidate lost. Better luck next time. It'll be disappointing, but you can still respect the fact that if someone managed to run for president, they're probably qualified to do the job. Unless it's Donald Trump. I feel like you should, in more standard times, you'd probably be able to civilly disagree. And it's not that big of a deal if your candidate doesn't win. But like I said, I've also never really experienced that. That's all for the extra stuff I had. Let's see. I might wrap this up. We're at 42 minutes. Wow, I managed to banter for that long, and it wasn't even that garbage. Last and most important question. Are we hitting up the pub afterwards? Yeah. All right. Give me like 20 minutes. We can hit the pub. I would like to go to an actual pub. It probably feels nice to just grab a pint, sit with the fellas at the bar, play some pool. You know what? Ooh, wait, before you log off, I've been thinking about, since I'll be in Iowa over the summer, because I live here now, I'll probably still be able to do radio over the summer. And I'm thinking, should I have a birthday bash? Should I try and have an on-air birthday bash for my small audience? It would be nice to have my 21st birthday extravaganza on air. Let's have a big party, the roast of Lenny Love. That would be pretty fun. You'll fly down for the bash. Hope to see you here. But I think I'm going to end the stream. It's already 11:51. We've been at it for 45 minutes. But all right. Shoot, today might be the reason I get taken off air. Well, the board's doing its thing, so I'll see you all next week. Come with your hot questions, hot off the press. Au revoir, everyone. Have a lovely Saturday.